when you go back to that adversity and that challenge, it really gives you confidence to know, you can get through anything, but it also gives you a sense of gratitude for this industry, that this industry is incredible. I mean, this is a place where, again, I truly believe anything is possible.
Howdy, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Leadership in the Dealership podcast, where we strive to share the latest and greatest trends shaping the automotive industry with today's thought leaders. I'm your host, Don Richards-Beff, and we've got a great conversation ahead with Sam Dark, COO of Zeigler Automotive Group, a juggernaut with 41 stores across 4 states, 2,700 employees, and coverage across nearly every brand that you'd want to own in the industry. Sam, great to see you this afternoon. How are you?
Hey, good to be here, Don. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump right in. And for those who aren't familiar with Zeigler, can you give us a quick background?
Yeah, so Zeigler was formed in the early 1970s by Harold Zeigler, the current owner's dad, and he started out as a Ford dealer in Lowell, Michigan, a single point dealer, and he went from that point to his son, Aaron Zeigler, taking over in the early 2000s and taking multiple points in Lowell and Kalamazoo, Michigan, to an absolute empire, expanding to 41 locations, including the acquisition of 6 stores this past year, 4 in Holland, Michigan, on the shores of Lake Michigan, and then 2 in Indiana, 1 in Fort Wayne, a Subaru store, and then the only Subaru store that's in the same town as a Subaru factory in Lafayette, Indiana. So we've had a heck of a lot of fun just through this growth. It's great to be part of a team that's dedicated, committed to winning, and we just keep growing. That's the fun part. So
you're going in the right direction. Instead of getting smaller, getting bigger.
Yeah.
Awesome. And still expansion opportunities ahead.
Yeah. I mean, Aaron would tell you every day he entertains acquisition opportunities, and the biggest challenge today isn't opportunities; it's just finding the right opportunity in the right geography and with the right people ready to lead. And one of the biggest reasons we do shows like yours and others is we want to get the message out that it's a great place to be. It's a great organization to be aligned with, and we have a lot of different areas where we can put great people who want to become incredible leaders and teach them how to run stores, teach them different leadership and roles within a dealership, and ultimately give them opportunities that they maybe once only thought possible.
Awesome. Well, before we get into attracting great people and keeping great people, tell us how you got to where you are today with Zeigler. Quick background on you and your story, and we may dwell there for longer than other topics, but introduce yourself and tell us how you got to lead Zeigler today.
It's a little bit of an improbable story. I never thought, I think most people probably never think that they would land in the car business. You grow up saying, hey, I want to be an attorney. I want to be like a pilot. I want to be a fireman, but you don't ever grow up saying, hey, I want to be a car salesman. And it's one of the biggest tragedies, in our world, I think, because the opportunity in automotive is incredible. I tell people a lot of the time that automotive is the last great American industry, that you can come here with any background. It doesn't matter how educated or how little educated you are. It doesn't matter, anything in your background. As long as you come to this business with a strong desire to work, the sky's the limit. And I found that to be true as a high schooler looking for a part-time job. I started as a lot guy, sweeping the lot and cleaning what's called dash sweat off the very first Kias that were ever sold in Utah, way out west, in the mid 1990s. And I worked for a Kia Isuzu franchise, and then shortly thereafter that went into sales, went to Saturn, and then I went to go work for a business-to-business insurance and F&I company, where I worked for 2 decades working with the largest auto groups across the country, and that really informed my experience on the different ways that large auto groups are run, the biggest ways that they execute, and truly this whole notion, which I love, that it's not about knowing what to do, it's about executing and doing it, right? And it's one of the reasons why, again, we do podcasts like this, we do shows like this, we even have our own podcast. Is people are like, well, you're going to share all your secrets, you're going to tell everything that you do, and we're more than happy to share anything by and large, because you've got to have excellent people who are willing to execute on it and do it the moment they hear it and they recognize it to be good. So anyway, I worked for this large insurance company for a couple decades, had great experiences there. Some of the best people I worked with in the industry, both on the automotive side and also on the insurance F&I side. And then as we launched into COVID, Aaron Zeigler, who was one of my biggest clients at that time, came to me and said, hey, look, we need someone to come into this organization and head up our finance and insurance efforts. So initially I came across as VP of F&I, and then shortly thereafter, very shortly, I guess 10 months or so after I came aboard there, he said, hey, come into the COO role. And it has been fun. Some people are like, well, hey, COO, that's a big title. And my response to that is it's not much, right? It's nothing, because it's serving all of these general managers and all the employees across the auto group, but then also supporting Mr. Zeigler and his vision and role and how he sees the world. He's 100% day to day, 100% in command and control of the organization. And it's because of his vision and just his aggressive approach to this business that we continue to grow. And we've taken big risks at key moments in time, risks that have paid off. So that's how I landed here. Again, as a kid, never thought, hey, I want to become a car salesman. In fact, I don't know what your story is getting into the business, but I remember in the early 90s going to college and selling cars and making a ton of money as a car sales guy, and just being super conflicted as a human being about, I am not going to go into car sales. And I remember going to some interviews to be a drug rep for a pharma company, which was really the cool thing to do in the early 90s. Like, everybody loved that idea. And I would have had to have taken 50% pay cut, right? And I was like, I can't, how do you do that? So I chose the path that I suppose was less traveled, but the path that a lot of people look at as less cool. And I'll tell you what, those that say that, the auto industry has just been a cool industry over these past several decades. So,
well, like you said, great opportunity. I've thought about leaving, and there's never a boring moment, for sure, and there's always interesting problems to solve. And I think that's what keeps many of us coming back day after day, is we're just not done, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of that perception of what was being in a car dealership like, or what are people's perception? I don't know if I want to go into auto dealerships versus drug sales. Hey, that's a great industry, right?
Yeah.
But I think the tide is turning in how we serve people. You talk about CEO not doing a whole lot, but you're in service of GMs. And frankly, I'm sure Zeigler, right? You're in service of your staff and your people. Yeah. And you're in service of your customers. So fantastic. So let's talk about Zeigler, and then how you attract great people, and how you've built a winning culture. I think one of the things I've heard recently about you is you have a high ranking on Glassdoor, which I think it's tough for anyone to get to the top, much less an auto group. So what's brought you there?
Yeah. So again, it goes way back to the founding of the company. Harold Zeigler, his entire focus in founding the company is not unusual. I always laugh when people say, hey, do the right thing. Well, of course you say do the right thing. Who says do the wrong thing? No, nobody's doing that. And yet this industry, if you look back decades, especially back into the 70s and 80s, doing the right thing by the customer continually wasn't always the natural thing. Sometimes you made more money short term by doing the wrong thing than you did doing the right thing. And Harold, from those early days in the 70s and 80s, those were tough economic times. In fact, it's crazy. Some of the biggest headwinds you saw back then are similar in some ways to what we see today: high interest rates, high inflation, the supply issues, and some of the other things. And despite those, he really focused on connecting with the community, to giving back to the community, doing the right thing, treating the customer right. And he also, I think, really focused on the employee experience, and this concept that a lot of great business leaders have echoed since. Richard Branson, saying, hey, if you don't train your employees, do you need them? Do you want them? Harold really focused on doing those right things by customer and employee, and Aaron doubled down on that. And as a result of that, as you mentioned, work-life balance ranking on Glassdoor, which is really astounding for any retail business, let alone the car business, right? We notoriously work long hours. We notoriously work in these 30-day cycles where life, you win or you lose in 30 days, and then you start over again on the first day of the month. And
Day
so,
zero.
yeah, so to be able to create a culture where the employees themselves would say, hey, this is a really good balance. If I need to go to a soccer game, if I need to go to a baseball game, if I need to be there for my family members, I'm supported in it. There's opportunities for family members to attend things together. We sponsor a NASCAR team, number 77 NASCAR with Spire Motorsports. Carson Hosevars from Portage, Michigan. We give families opportunities to come see things like this and experience interesting and unique events together. We also have a health and wellness program through a company called AM Wellness, and once a month we have a competition, and we track it. It's trackable on iPhones and Androids. And the concept of this is, you have a better work-life balance. You're happier. You're able to better connect with other employees and with your customers if you're healthy. And so once a month we get together and we do some sort of a challenge. So it might be minutes working out. Recently we did a lunge challenge where Aaron Zeigler did so many lunges in the course of a month late last year that he was in first place. It was a 3-way race between 3 people, and then he ended up doing some knee damage to him at a Michigan State football game and had to go out. But we're so competitive even on things health related that it just makes it a heck of a lot of fun. And Aaron hasn't said, hey, this is just for employees. He said this is for employees and this is for family members. So a couple of our recent contests, we give out awards, Amazon gift certificates, things like that. We've had family members not directly employed by the auto group who have won those. And so it really creates, if your family is supporting the things that you're doing at work and they're curious about what you're doing at work and they're excited and engaged and energized by what you do at work, it makes it a heck of a lot easier for you to leave the house and go be awesome for yourself, for your customers, and for other employees during the day.
We always hear happy wife, happy life. But in this case, I guess happy employee, happy family, and vice versa. Healthy as well. Yeah. So when you're bringing new employees in, you said, one of the things that you think about is regardless of your background. So you could be a green pea, heck, you could be a seasoned executive as well. Where do you start in bringing bringing employees in and onboarding them? What does successful onboarding to the Zeigler way look like? And then how do you keep training them to grow the org and grow the culture?
Yeah. We've thought, I think, and we've reimagined that entire quote unquote onboarding process. So it's kind of a crazy thing. People talk about how the biggest decisions we make in life, and in fact, I think I've seen some research somewhere, it talks about the biggest stressors in life are marriage, right? So if you get a divorce, and then job. If you lose your job, that can be the source of massive stress. So you can imagine being in your 30s and 40s, even 50s, 60s and on, changing a job, leaving one employer and going to another, and the terror that is associated with that, right? You want to know.
Back to high school every time, right?
Yeah. It's like the old, I can't tell, you're probably not old enough to know this, but like Fame, right? You want to know Cheers. You want to go where everybody knows your name, right? And you want to know that you've got a group of people that care about you there around you. And we do culture surveys once a year where we listen to employees, and commonly the biggest thing we hear in culture surveys is we want to be heard. And the things that we say, we want to be able to have an impact and a voice. And I think, a lot of people say, hey, income is the most important thing in a job. And income is important because that's what allows us to live and sure, support families and do everything else we do. But it's not the biggest, most impactful feature of employment. Being able to, I think, increasingly in this current age, being able to make a difference and have an impact is. And so when you talk about onboarding, I chuckle because like that sounds like such a rigid process. I think the onboarding process begins well before an employee comes and becomes part of the Zeigler Auto Group. The first thing we focus on, Don, is we focus on advancing from within. So if we can find a general manager, a sales manager, a finance manager, if we can find a technician inside the auto group, that's where we want to be. And there is no onboarding for that, because if you're let's say you're a salesperson and you say, hey, I want to become a finance manager. We have 2 resources where you can go learn, self-learn, and then you can participate in classes to learn that role, so that when you transition into that leadership role, and yes, finance is leadership at our auto group because it's an important key role where you impact the lives of a lot of people around you. There is no onboarding, because you've got a group, you've got a tribe, you've got people you're connected with. So we have performance groups for each one of these. We have a performance group for finance managers. We have a performance group for GMs. So if I'm a sales manager, I want to become a GM, I get in this group, I spend a year learning about being a GM. And by the time you get into the GM role, you've got great resources to go to for help. If you're a service writer, Don, at Zeigler Auto Group, and you're like, hey, I want to become a technician, right outside my studio right now here in Kalamazoo, Michigan at Honda Kalamazoo, there's a class of people that have raised their hands and said, hey, I want to become a technician. And there's a little bit of classroom work. There's a lot of like actual in the lane service drive work. And then there's actually some cool stuff you get at the end of that class, including some free tools and some other things to help you along the way and in that journey. So when you say onboarding, what's our onboarding process? I chuckle at that just because we want that process to begin early. And then we want to follow you and have you be part of the Zeigler family throughout your career. We'd rather start that way. Now, if you're someone that comes from outside the organization, there is onboarding, right? So, we do the traditional stuff. There's a cool box, there's shirts, there's phone calls from people around you who you work with. There's actually a class called Keys to Success that does an incredible job over the course of a day of teaching you about Zeigler culture. You'll learn about something we call diamond drops, which is a recognition tool where employees can recognize each other in front of other people and give them recognition and kind of that sense of fulfillment and achievement from each other. But I'm going to stick with the best answer isn't so much onboarding as it is let's start early and let's develop you through the life of your career.
I love it. And it sounds like the support network, you're looking for self-directed employees and motivation as well, right? Yeah. It's in a world of meritocracy, right? Where high performers advance and whatnot. You're looking for people who raise their hand and say, I want this. And it sounds like you're giving them the opportunity to go get it as well, right? Join up with other GMs, other service advisors, other F&I leaders, and show us you've got what it takes. Teach, kind of be an autodidact. Teach yourself and come to the programs that we've got, and that's how you'll advance with Zeigler. Great.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how often I'm in front of these performance groups, and people are like, "Hey, how do I become a leader?" What's the? Everybody wants to become a GM, right? So many people see that as the crowning achievement, or some sort of a leadership role, or you get assigned checks and you get it. And the answer is there are more GM roles available out in the marketplace than there possibly are candidates ready to raise their hand and fill those. So the challenge of the individual in this world, in this automotive world, is to prep yourself by getting experience, by getting exposed to different people, by creating relationships, so that when that opportunity comes and you raise your hand, you're ready to take that. And I'll tell you, Don, there's just not, Aaron would buy another 50 stores today. The limiting factor for expansion isn't money. The limiting factor for expansion is talent and people ready to lead.
Yeah. So it sounds like everything's great at Zeigler. You've got great teams, great performance. But oftentimes great teams find themselves in adversity, right? So challenges are what separate great performers from sometimes teams that think they're amazing and then they hit adversity and find out they're not. You had adversity in your background. So can you relay a little bit about that? And then as personal adversity, how did that change you as an individual? And then maybe let's talk about how Zeigler has worked through adversity, things like COVID, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. We all have a ton of adversity. I've had a lot of different adversity. Which one are you talking about, Don?
I'm thinking of your teenage years. You were at home.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got you. So I haven't talked a lot about this. You must have listened to another podcast that I did.
I've done my homework.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, as a high school kid, I joked with, I was on, I think it was a Sodu and a couple of others.
Sodu, Dan Crenshaw.
Yep. And I was joking with those guys that, if in high school you're not crazy enough for a hot minute that people get frustrated with you, you're doing something wrong. And, as a high school kid, I found myself kind of kicked out of the house and kind of out on my own, having to make it on my own. And that includes like pay the bills, right? As a high school kid, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I have to like find a place to live, and I've got to pay for food, and I've got to do all the other ordinary things I had to adult, right? Like, it's crazy to even think about. And I went out and found this job as a lot guy at, again, the Isuzu dealership. And I still remember the dealership as vividly as possibly can. They, not a high volume. I think they sold 30, 40 cars a month in the early days before they got the Kia franchise. But I would sweep the lot. I would roof the building. I would just do every little thing that you possibly could. And I came to understand how great the auto industry is that first winter when I was on my own, and I had no place to go. And I remember this, and I've talked about it elsewhere as vividly as yesterday. I snuck in at night. I stayed there actually one night for several nights and actually slept there in the shop in the parts department. Remember the smell of the old couch. Remember, what it felt like to be in that super cold room. And I remember one night watching the snow fall, falling asleep, and then being awoken by somebody standing there as I'm on the couch. And it was some guy that was just kind of the watchman. Like he was just kind of security for the dealership. I didn't even know we had that guy. And he said, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, hey, I just explained, I sleep in here, just had to sleep here. And then the next day went and took my shower, went to work as I normally would. And he told the dealer, and the dealer said, hey, just let him do it. And the kindness and graciousness of that guy to just allow that. And then interestingly, the kindness and graciousness of him, not only to allow that, but to pour time and energy and focus into me. I was a high school senior, just graduated high school when I flipped from being a lot guy to selling cars, which is astounding. So that summer that I graduated, they were doing construction on the road out in front of the car dealership where I worked. And, the road was ripped up. It was tough to get in the car dealership. We had 4 or 5 salespeople. They're off doing whatever because there's no traffic. Nobody's coming on the lot. Well, I'm out washing cars. And guess what, Don? Anybody that came on the lot was there to buy a car. If you had to go through like this obstacle maze to get into the dealership, you were there to buy it. And so I learned as a lot guy to talk to customers who are like, hey, what do you know about this car? And I would say, I don't know. Let's go find out together. And I was closing cars, selling deals. I was the number one sales guy at that car dealership, that Isuzu and then Kia dealership. And I was a lot guy, and these sales guys would pay me. Hopefully, it's 30 years ago, so that there's no tax ramifications anymore. But they would pay me under the table in cash. They split it in half, and then as I entered my first year in college, the dealer's like, well, hey, we want you to do 1 more year as a lot guy, and I'm like, no, let's do sales. Yeah. Come on, you see the value, and
I like the cash coming in, and that's even. Kia wasn't ripping it up like they are right now.
Yeah, he was kind and gracious, but I said, hey, I want to sell, and I'm going to sell, and I was about ready to be done and move on, and he said, fine, you can sell. And then we got the Kia franchise. I still remember to this day, Kia Sophia was our first brand, We sold the Kia Sophia manual transmission, no air, steel wheels. We'd spray paint the steel wheels for $54.95, which, you can't find a 200,000 mile used car today for $5,500, let alone a brand new Kia. So I sound super old, Don, but when you think,
this is
when
your roots, man.
Yeah, when you go back to that adversity and that challenge, it really gives you confidence to know, you can get through anything, but it also gives you a sense of gratitude for this industry, that this industry is incredible. I mean, this is a place where, again, I truly believe anything is possible. And if anything frustrates me, it's somebody that's sitting in a high potential role who doesn't see the potential of that role. That's partly my job as a leader, is to help them realize that, and then doesn't work to fully realize their own potential. I mean, it's wasted, right? Partly my fault if they don't see that vision and pursue it, but also it's on them too to pursue that on their own as well.
So how have you taken your experience with adversity and turning adversity into opportunity? Clearly, how have you used that to relate to the staff that you're overlooking now? If you see someone struggling, how do you frame that as this isn't failure? This is simply an opportunity to become better.
Yeah.
What are you doing about that?
That's probably a better question for the people who work throughout the organization as opposed to me. I would hope that one of the strengths I bring to the table in my role is the ability to cast a big vision, right? So when you think about the finance world, you think about other things that we've done, from our podcast, which we created a couple of years ago. We've produced over 300 episodes of that podcast in that time. Like, communicating and connecting our employees together has been important to Aaron Zeigler from the beginning. And then I think I've enhanced it with some of the tools and natural capabilities that I've brought to the fold as well. But, I think, again, going back to the pay thing, we to answer your question, we work with, I don't know if you remember this guy, Jim Craig. He was the goalie of the Olympic team, the U.S. Olympic team that beat the Russians in the early 1980s, and the subject of Miracle on Ice. He helped make it. He does a lot of leadership classes with us, and he always talks about, do you treat people equally, or do you treat people individually? And I think treating people well in business and in our world has more to do with looking at what their potential is, trying to assess it, and then helping them to realize that potential than somehow treating everybody the exact same. Treating everybody the exact same actually does most people a supreme disservice. So I also think that employees, and it should almost be a part of an employee bill of rights, deserve to be brought into a vision that's much larger than themselves, to have that sense that they're giving back and they're part of something. And so, this communication that we do through the podcast, social media, and a lot of other things is part of that. A lot of the things that Aaron has set up from the very beginning, we do monthly general manager meetings where we bring different roles into our training room, and they get a chance to report out to the owner of the company, right? If I'm a parts manager at some far-flung dealership and all of a sudden I'm standing in front of the owner of the auto group for 2-3 minutes, it's both at once terrifying, but the opportunity for many and most is inspiring as well. And in that moment, I know and I realize and I understand how impactful I can be in the world by being there, right? And so I think that's what that adversity has kind of taught me and enabled me to relate to others. I don't think it's made me say, hey, avoid adversity. That's not right. Right.
Definitely not right.
I may have tried that with my own kids, because you want to try to save your kids from adversity just to make life easy. And that's also not the right way. But I think if anything, it's made me feel more urgent to help people find the right role, and then more urgent once they're in the right role for them to realize their potential. And then if they're not in the right role, it's like, hey, let's not just occupy this role because we've always had it. Let's figure out what that right role is and where you can best serve the team. So
you've got a large large group, rapidly expanding. So you got buy sells, you're bringing new people, you're advancing from within. You've got, I think, 24 brands across your rooftops, 4 states. So a bit of a burgeoning empire. But you've got Zeigler across all of them. So when you have OEM brands and OEM influence, and you walk into a Ford store or a Kia store or a Chevy store, and they want things done their way. But then you have the Zeigler way. How do you implement a process and systems that bring that consistent Zeigler experience, customer, employee focused, customer focused? How do you do that when you're also dealing with the OEM influence? How do you bring from one state to another to a different brand that consistent great customer experience?
Yeah. Well, so I think the one thing that no OEM, no state, no one is wanting to take over or take control of is the employee experience. And I think if you focus on the employee experience first, the employee experience, if focused on first, will drive a consistent employee experience top down, or a consistent customer experience top down, because employees deliver on that. And so all the things I've talked about, from performance groups to, we didn't talk about Zeigler speaker series. We can get into that a little bit later. There's a lot of things that we do that give our employees a unified experience as an employee that they can then turn to their customers. And then euphoria is when the factory or the OEM experience lines up with that. So we recently, acquired the 2 Subaru stores. We had 2 prior to it, one in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and then another in Cherville, Indiana. And Subaru is a crazy brand. Right? It's totally different from any other brand that you'll see out there. I went to a factory meeting 2 weeks ago in Vegas, and they're not focusing on price, payment. There was just a little bit on the vehicle and a little bit on EVs, but they are so focused on what they call this love promise and the employee experience, and then the customer experience. They're forever, surveying our employees for what their employee experience is like. And there's something really kind of cool about that, right? Like, and it's not that the financial performance isn't super important. It's massively important. It's one of our best stores. It's not that, and they put a ton of stock into NPS or the basically the CSI scores. So euphoria is when Zeigler culture aligns with OEM culture. Aaron Zeigler was recently on the Car Dealership Guy, the CDG podcast, and had some strong words. So he'll say some strong things every now and again. He said strong words for Stellantis on that show, and also had a pretty strong opinion for Ford as it relates to EVs and whatnot. And so, I mean, there's moments where you have to have crucial conversations with OEMs to help better align. But I don't think we've ever. I can't think of I mean, Aaron's probably the better person to ask this. I can't think of a situation where the OEM has just been completely out of line with our individual culture.
Sure.
But I would think that it would spur a crucial conversation if that ever happened.
Yeah. You talk about Subaru performing well financially, and it seems that's there's spreadsheet management. Are we controlling cost, et cetera? But it seems like profitability in that case is an outcome of great people, great employee experience leads to great customer experience, leads to higher profitability. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Will Guidara, but in the restaurant business, they have this concept of dream weavers, and that is the employees have the autonomy, right? The ability to do whatever is necessary that leads to a great customer experience, which then leads to customers coming back over and over. So we talk about retention in our industry. It's wow. The thing that they remember may not be the meal. It may be that great experience that they had, but it was employees that walk away day after day going, and you said this earlier, I made a difference,
Yeah.
right? I had an impact in someone's life. And so it sounds like your best brands, best performers are those areas where you're getting that kind of experience, where employees come in and say, man, I know my job is not to, just drive growth, right? It's not about front end, back end. It's about the customer experience, and profitability. Unit profitability is going to come along with that. So great to hear about Subaru, and yes, they are different, but different for a good reason.
We actually had a salesperson at one of our Subaru stores who was a sales guy, longtime sales guy, pretty good at it, enjoyed selling cars. There's a role within Subaru called an experience, love experience champion, I think it is. But they basically, their entire world is to create a great experience for that customer on a redelivery, right? So we sell the car initially, and a lot happens between finance and paperwork and delivery and all that. This person actually brings the experienced champion, brings the customer back and redelivers the car and explains it to them and just make sure they have an incredible experience. Well, this sales guy said, hey, you know what? I would rather do that job. And we transitioned him over to that six months or so ago. And he is lit up, like he loves it. And from a comp standpoint, it's a different structure altogether, right? But he loves that. Every role within the car dealership has an important role in that overall customer experience and employee experience. When I was washing cars and sweeping the lot, when I swept that lot well, that created a great experience. Like as it relates to the clean lot, there was no more important job than what I was doing back then. And like Tom Izzo says, who's a friend of the Auto Group, and we've had a lot on our own podcast, you've got to know your job. You've got to do your job. If you know your job, you do your job. You're going to be wildly successful in the world. It's part of the reason we love NASCAR, right? When you watch a pit stop, everybody has a role, everybody has a job, and that job relates to the outcome. And there's no way for a driver who gets all the glory and credit to win if the guy in front of the front right tire doesn't change that tire fast enough. And great organizations recognize the individual contribution, find ways, unique and interesting ways to praise it, to hold it out, and to make that individual contributor absolutely, completely convinced and convicted that they make a difference. And without them, the world wouldn't turn, but also, it doesn't depend on only them, right? You've got to have depth, but yeah.
It's great that you have an environment where you had an employee that was self-aware enough to say, hey, I think I might want another opportunity.
Yeah.
As well, that you are fostering those opportunities, giving it not like, I don't know, we need to keep you over here on sales. We're short.
Yeah.
You're looking to, I think, optimize, right? Optimize the customer experience and that employee success and growth. So, fantastic. So, we talk about people, we talk about process. Obviously, on the vendor side, you make tons and tons of choices about what technology you're going to put in place. I know the industry, we're all still kind of thinking about the reverberations from the CDK outage. And I've had many conversations about that with folks where, sure, you change your processes, you use backups, and you just keep going, right? That's another form of adversity. But how do you look at technology and playing a role in the dealership as far as helping your people become better and serve an even better customer experience?
So we believe wholeheartedly, like ever since I've been in the car business since the late 80s, the early 90s there, I remember the parts manager who sat very close to that couch where I slept that night. His name was Brian. I remember he had a computer, and that was a pretty cool thing. And he had a disk from a company called AOL, and he could upload that disk, and then he could connect to the internet, and he could do amazing things. And we were all super impressed with what he could do. And he and we all thought, hey, there will be a day where that technology will replace people in in the auto business, and it'll all just happen online. And I would tell you, we think that's absolute BS. We don't think that. We think that buying a car is essentially a human experience, that it's complicated and complex enough that at the end of the day, many people show a preference for having that individual one-on-one connection.
Sure.
And there will be, so a certain percentage of people that want to do it 100% digitally, 100% online, never want to see a person. We need to be where they are, and we do run towards them in that experience. But we also have to be really well trained on the human side. We believe we need all the technology, the best technology at our people's disposal so that they can serve that customer the best way possible. So, we make very conscientious decisions about different technologies to use to run towards the consumer. And, we recently saw how technology can fail, and you've got to have people who are there ready to overcome that. You talk about adversity, with the recent CDK outage, down for 10 days, CDK, you've got to assume did all the right things to try to get that data back, to secure it, and to bring us back up and running. And meanwhile, our folks went to 1990s, right? Like they were handwriting everything. They were still, there were auto groups where dealerships told their parts people or service departments or salespeople to go home and, come back when things were back up and running 10 days ago. And that was horrible advice to anybody that did that. And we didn't. We stayed open. We doubled our efforts. People worked a lot harder, in some cases for less, because the volume went down gently during that time period. And then when things came back up, everybody had to hustle to enter data back in and get it back up and running. And the interesting thing about adversity, Don, is you become better on the other side of it. And so while that technology failed momentarily, our people adapted, learned, and then brought us back up. And then CrowdStrike is another great example. I flew Delta during the time when CrowdStrike impacted air travel all over the place. And had you not had great flight attendants and great service crew with Delta there to help people the best they could with that technology outage, it would have been more devastating than it was. It was pretty devastating at that, but you can't replace people, because when technology fails, you need the person on the other side as well. So tech is important, but it doesn't replace the individual. It makes us better able to serve our customers.
Yeah. Are you doing any, so you talk about kind of running towards the customer, being where they want to be. One of the podcasts we did, Ed Roberts, Bozard Ford in St. Augustine, Florida, they do mobile service.
Yeah.
Right? So meeting the customer where they're at.
Yeah.
And so you think about, you got mobile service, we have online sales burgeoning, obviously EV, pure EV players leading the charge there. But there's always a person behind it, right? Ed talked about mobile service is great because we're going to the customer, but it's actually a chance to build a better relationship, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, if you're selling to someone online, it's you're giving them kind of what they want, maybe what they think they need.
Yeah.
But if they hit a speed bump in that transaction, there's always someone there to back it up.
Yeah.
So with things like we had COVID years ago, we've had chip shortages, with the recent CDK outage, does that change how you think about technology backups or diversification? So do you diversify your relationships with people, or do you kind of lean in and say, we're pretty comfortable with, finding the best of breed, and if it means we're going to do everything with one vendor, we're happy to do that, whether, it'd be CDK or anyone else. Do you change your perspective at all based on what we just saw?
I think our strategy has been and continues to be, we want to have the very best partners with whom we have a personal, close one-on-one relationship. So as an example, CDK, Brian McDonald, the CEO of the company, as tragic as the whole experience was, when he spoke and he said something, generally it pretty well happened. And he had a direct line of communication and was able to let us know, in a world where there was a ton of noise and there was gazillion rumors and nobody was exactly sure truly what was going on. Right. He was able to give some certainty in the world of that uncertainty. We've also had great relationships where that senior leader has left and we no longer have that, and it erodes trust because things that were promised in the past don't happen, and we've had to pull away from those relationships. So I would actually say the reverse is probably true, and I don't know if that's, we could probably be convinced otherwise, but when you have a great relationship with a company, with a decision maker, somebody at the highest level that can make things happen, and the longer that relationship goes, and the less decisions you have to make in that relationship, the better it is for everyone. And so our most important relationships, from F&I provider to lenders to DMS and CRM, and we even have some technologies that we utilize within vehicles during COVID. We've often talked about how LoJack saved us, right? We were having cars stolen left and right in the Chicagoland during COVID, just broad daylight. And we went from having, hundreds of vehicles stolen to none overnight because of that one product. And as a result, we become very close friends with the CEO of the company, or the CFO of the company itself. And, anybody that will listen, we're a raving fan for that product, but also, just close to the company. So I think that's the best way to operate in today's world. It's to, again, notwithstanding technology, form close relationships and be loyal to those relationships, make and keep promises, right?
It's the people behind the technology once again. So,
yeah.
All right. So we'll think about as you're growing the group, you've got acquisitions. You mentioned earlier vision. So as we think about Zeigler and its future, your future, what's the vision? Where does the next 5-10 years take Zeigler, you and Aaron, your GMs, your 2,700 employees?
So Aaron is often asked, he's like, hey, what's the next buy? Or, hey, what's the right number of stores to get? And he'll always respond, that's the wrong question, right? Because, again, we would double our footprint today if we had enough leaders and people ready to step up. And we'd also, if we had the right opportunities, there's never been a moment since I joined the company all these years ago, or became connected to the company in my business to business role. There's never been a moment where it's been like, hey, we're done growing, or, hey, we're going to stop for a while. It's always been, hey, where's the next opportunity? So there's no goal behind that in terms of growth. It's just, we want to keep growing. So, and continually looking at opportunities and deals and assessing the best fit. So, and in the world of acquisitions, I would suppose, you probably look at, there's a multiplier behind the number you look and the number you close. And obviously you don't buy everything you look at. So,
yeah. So you think about attracting talent. We'll close on this.
Okay.
New talent, up and coming folks. You've got the folks that you're going to advance from within, and absolutely the right way to do it. But when someone's thinking about the auto industry or something else, right? And there's your choice. How do you bring them into the fold? What advice do you give to folks who may not be sure? And how do you attract that next generation of talent?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. So, I mean, the auto business isn't for everybody, right? So nothing is. Everybody has their place. Everybody has something that speaks to them, that excites them, that lights them up. And I think the more you can kind of get adjacent to it, I mean, there's so much stuff on social media today. There's so much stuff we do with our podcasts you can listen to, and other things between the Zeigler Auto Group YouTube channel and elsewhere. A lot of people who end up becoming part of the organization will watch from afar and kind of get a sense of the culture, and then ultimately make the jump. And what I would say to anybody that's listening, that's either in the auto industry or thinking about getting into it, do that. Listen, research, study. And if it speaks to you in some way or another, if you're inspired by the challenge, if you're interested or even just curious about what it looks like, I would reach out to us. You can DM me through the various social channels. LinkedIn's a good one. We also have our head of hiring and recruiting. His name's Mike Van Ryn. His email address is mvr at Zeigler, zeigler.com. And he does a great job. People who have questions, he does an incredible job, and his team of providing just a ton of information, so that they can get a sense. But I would close saying where we started, right? This auto industry is the last great American industry, I think, and what distinguishes auto from anything else out there is, when you read the job description, it doesn't say, hey, you have to have a PhD or a bachelor's, or you don't have to have had any specific training. We have people in our auto group that have been CPAs, that have been attorneys. We have a hot air balloon pilot that was recently featured on Automotive News, who consulted for Up and Argonauts or Aeronauts and a bunch of other movies. Like, he's a balloon pilot. Now he's a sales manager at our Fiat Alfa Romeo Maserati store in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Granville, Michigan. And he loves doing what he does, and he has his own reasons for it. But in his world, he's able to still do the balloon pilot thing. We've got a Zeigler hot air balloon, but he's also able to connect with customers and develop a team in a way that just lights him up and really speaks to him. We could sell, we happen to be selling cars, but with the culture we have, we could be selling anything and still achieve and accomplish our main goal. So,
yeah, well, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me, Sam. And you said folks can find you on LinkedIn. You've got the Driving Vision podcast as well. So
yeah.
I think you've got 100 plus episodes in the can. So be sure to check Sam out there. And then when we go live on this, we'll be excited to connect with you again soon. So thanks again, and looking forward to connecting with you hopefully one day in person at Zeigler, as well as the next industry event we bump into each other.
Absolutely. Thanks, Don. Appreciate your time.